Next, we've got NiCole Keith coming up, a professor and dean at the School of Health and Human Sciences at Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis. IUPUI?
Yes.
All right, you hear that in the NCAA tournament, so keep that going in March. Member of the Science Advisory Council for Tsai Human Performance, talking about sexism, ageism, racism, and many other isms.
So I'm going to talk today just about isms, first of all. And I want you all to think about this has to do with all of us. I don't want you to say this doesn't have to do with me. I'm not like that. This is not an accusation. It's a realization that isms exist. My PhD students are like, Dr. Keith, is that really a word? Yes, it is actually a word. I've defined it for you up there. I know everyone in the room can read, so I'm not going to read it to you. But it is actually a word. And the isms that I'm going to talk about today, so you wonder where I'm going with this, are listed on the slide. So let's get started. And so the first type of ism, because I do work in the Center for Aging Research and work with older adults, who I classify as being 55 years of age and older, is ageism. And when I'm talking to students and with other colleagues about having older adults be physically active, I come across these stereotypes. And it's a practice of discriminating against someone because of their age. It's assuming that people who are older adults are uneducated, that they're unintelligent, that they don't understand, that they're inferior to more modern, proactive young adults. And it's blaming sometimes the negative social changes that we've seen, especially in the United States, on older adults. It's our politics. It's how divided we are as a nation, and it's a problem. And ageism is deeply rooted in U.S. culture. If you look at the media, if you look at different forms of entertainment, we're often picking on older adults. And we typically experience a lifetime of negative experiences when it comes to growing older. And so older adults ourselves, because I'm there, can also be completely ageist. I can't do that, I'm too old. You can do that because you're so young. Excuse my vision, excuse my hearing. These are all really ageist comments that we have to move away from. We avoid certain activities because they're new to us. And we segregate ourselves from younger adults. We don't belong there. And so really, let's not stigmatize loss of ability. That's ableism, which I will get to. It's not ageism. As you grow older, it doesn't mean you become lesser in terms of your physical or cognitive function. And so I talked about media, messaging, and traditional contexts, making assumptions. There's a large body of research on physical activity and aging, and I just pulled out a couple that are some of my favorite reviews, and what I pulled out quotes. Older women consider exercise as an investment on improving physical capabilities, appearances, and functionality. And also, positive age stereotypes perform significantly better than those exposed to negative age stereotypes. So if you're in the industry of coaching, if you're in the industry of training, if you're in the industry of care, make sure that when you're talking to older adults, you talk to them in a similar manner. You make recommendations in ways that are similar to what you would do with a younger adult. The next ism, because I'm a black woman standing up here, this is a women's symposium and I'm obviously black, is racism. And it's the belief that humans may be divided biologically into separate races. And there are many scientists who say races don't exist anymore in our culture of miscegenation. And I would tend in some ways physically, biologically to agree. Sociologically, I would tend to disagree because different races have experienced discrimination in ways that other races haven't. And it's been specifically sociologically based on their race. There's this belief within racism that there are inherited traits, personalities, intellect, and morality that's associated with certain racial groups. And racism has been established globally in many ways, and so I listed some here in terms of internment camps, Atlantic slave trade, Trail of Tears, apartheid, and profiling. So globally, it's not just an American thing, we can't claim it. Globally, racism exists. There is such a thing as systemic racism, and I pulled a lot of very interesting statistics that I found shocking. Hopefully they shock you, but don't discourage you from fighting against racism. And so if we look at income, it's really what drives our economy. If you look at the base of a white family, approximately $134,000 a year is their annual income. Compare it to a Hispanic family, it's not a typo, guys, $14,000. A black family, $11,000. A single white woman, her annual income would be $41,000. With a single black woman, income would be $140. It's not a typo. And a black woman would be $120. That's their annual income. And when I listen to the news and look at about the reduction of SNAP benefits, I don't know how these women are going to feed their families, let alone eat themselves. And so it's really shocking. But when we talk about exercise and everybody can go out and walk, even if they're physically capable, but they not have time because they need to find a place to live and food to eat. There's also evidence of systemic racism in employment, housing, surveillance, incarceration, drug arrests, immigration policy, and infant mortality. So what's that got to do with physical activity? Well, it's really important, and I've peppered it throughout my addressing of racism, but we have to look at this as an asset-based approach. What are they doing to survive in other ways? Physical activity is imperative to survival. How can we implement physical activity opportunities in their ability to survive? In terms of cultural considerations, if we're not doing it, if we don't see people who look like us being physically active, why not? What is it about your culture? And we talk about our responsibility to our families, our responsibility to our communities, and our responsibilities to our children, and how does physical activity, not just as an opportunity to be role models for our children, but also to care for our children in terms of getting them out and exercising as well. And then in terms of community engagement, and I talk about this a lot in my own formal research, taking care of communities in terms of stopping crime, in terms of cleaning up, in terms of community gardening. These are all physical activity, ability to participate in physical activity. So sexism is a prejudice against someone based on their gender. And in the 1960s, it was explained that the oppression of women was widespread in nearly all human societies. Sexism replaced the word male chauvinism and the behavior that's reflected as a society by culture and as a whole. And we have to really be careful when we're talking about sexism as societal norms, perceived goals, images, assumptions about women that are not supported by science, and the lack of knowledge. And I just took this from the HRSA 2021 report about people who are going to health clubs and looking at the number of men compared to the number of women who participate in health clubs, which is actually an asset-based participation. Not everybody can do it. And how much people pay. So I just thought this was an interesting example of how physical activity participation by women is increasing. Classism is another ism, and it's the systemic oppression of groups or education based on their income or education. There are beliefs and cultural attitudes that rank people in terms of their economic status, their family lineage, their family dynamic, their job status, or their education. And again, I talked about classism in the 2 slides ago, that certain classes can be active and afford to pay for it, others can't. And so while we're enrolling people in our studies, while we're recruiting people to participate in sports, let's just think about the opportunities they had growing up. Ableism is discrimination of a social prejudice against people with disabilities, and it's the belief that people with abilities are superior to people who don't have particular abilities, and that we require fixing their disability when we in actuality need to function within the disability. And here I just have some examples of battling ableism. So choosing to be in accessible buildings, choosing accessible events, being thoughtful and respectful, and asking questions about their abilities rather than making assumptions. And I have watch what you say, but also watch what you think. And so if you catch yourself thinking something about someone based on their physical appearance, you got to fix that thought in your head. Sexism is discrimination against oppression of transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming people. And I just have some statistics up here for you about the dangers that people who are trans face in terms of sports participation and in terms of just being physically active in a public environment. And we have to select non-binary practices in our research, in our classes, in our language, in our facilities. We should not be making people choose what gender they are when they're participating in physical activity. The needs may vary by age in terms of what children and youth have experienced. People say, well, this is fixed for kids. No, it is not. It is not fixed for kids, but they might need something different. I am getting the stop sign, so I'm gonna go with Sexism. Kate's like, take some of my minutes. So I am gonna go with Sexism to not just saying that people who are fit and healthy. I've been noticing all morning that we really need to represent people who are larger adults too. They're active, not making the assumption that because someone is obese, that someone is unhealthy. We gotta stop doing that. We have to stop teaching about BMI and stop teaching about, well, if you're over a certain percent body fat, you're unhealthy. Everyone should be able to participate in sports. So I'm gonna go to the end. I just talked about some discriminations. I actually am gonna have to do this one. Stop thinking that discrimination is an individual practice, that discrimination is conscious and intentional, and that good people or organizations would never discriminate against anyone. It's not true. We do it all the time. We do it every day. It's part of our education, and we've got to fix it. It's our responsibility. My last slide is going to be stop the denial. When you tell someone, I don't see your sex, your gender, your race or ethnicity, your sexual identity, your socioeconomic status, your disability, your age, and or your geographic location. I just see people. What you're saying is, I don't see you. So let's face that we are visual people. Dr. Applebaum told us this morning, you're a better athlete when you can see. And I'm saying we all see, and let's acknowledge that. Thank you.